Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video. We just hit 42.7k subscribers. Let's get to 43k. Please like this video down below and subscribe to the channel before we get started. And today we have to do a little bit more analysis on the primaries that took place on last Tuesday, because there is a lot of things that I talked about in my last video which actually blew up. It got like 40,000 views out of nowhere, and a lot of that happened over the past couple of days, which I was very surprised by. But there's a big thing here and a big theme that happened, and a lot of it is you have the America First candidates in Kris Kobach and Daniel McCarthy, and there were a few other America First candidates down ballot. And what happened was they actually ended up losing. The America First candidates that are actually trying to execute Donald Trump's agenda in places like Kansas and places like Arizona, his candidates, his preferred method of candidates actually ended up losing in Kansas and Arizona, and it's happened throughout the primary season before. It's not just these guys. We definitely know there's been many people like James Tulp, people like Jarome Bell in Virginia, as I've been told that's his actual pronunciation. Thought it was Jarome Bell. Apparently it's Jarome Bell. I've heard both of those, so I'm not sure which one it is. But the bottom line is a lot of the America First candidates are not necessarily winning elections within the Republican Party, even though Donald Trump has moved the party into supporting things like, restrictive immigration, into supporting things like fair trade, not free trade, because you don't call this trade if we don't make money, we lose money. How is it exactly called trade? And America First foreign policy, at least on rhetoric, because, talking about Trump not withdrawing troops fast enough in some areas like Syria is a legitimate criticism of his presidency, a criticism that I have. But at the same time, I personally think that he's moved the party in the right direction when it comes to rhetoric, because rhetoric does matter, especially when you talk about the future of the party. And the bottom line is that Trump's preferred candidates that could have actually helped him execute his agenda fully, they ended up losing, a lot of them. In 2018, Donald Trump endorsed their challengers, even leading back to 2016. Donald Trump endorsed people like John McCain and Paul Ryan in their congressional primaries, and while in retrospect, because Paul Ryan's challenger ended up being a total and complete nut job, at least you could have gotten rid of McCain. You could have got something done with health care, because McCain wasn't there to impede on the agenda. If Trump endorsed Kelly Ward back in 2016, I could almost guarantee that she would have knocked off McCain in the primary, but he decided not to go that route. He decided not to do that, and as a result, it kind of hurt his agenda throughout. But the bottom line here is that Trump is not endorsing America First candidates, and you see this here, and personally, I'm not too upset Kobach lost. I think he would have been very competitive. I don't think he would have lost the general election. I think that it would have been very, very close, but, it would have been competitive. But we've seen internal polling that has Roger Marshall up by just 1, and we know the poll is trash, but I'm curious, and, in terms of if Kobach was the nominee, he probably could win by, 7 or 8. Marshall may end up winning by that same margin. But the bottom line here, and we know this, and we know that Donald Trump does not endorse a whole lot of America First candidates, although the ones he do, like Josh Hawley, like Ron DeSantis, if you want to classify them as America First, they tend to win their primaries, and they become stars, all of them. In some cases, like you saw in Texas, where you had Raul Reyes down there barely losing to Tony Gonzalez. He did not have Trump's endorsement. Trump endorsed the other guy, but he did have endorsements from people like Rand Paul, who's very smart when it comes to endorsements, people like Ted Cruz. In terms of them, they back America First candidates arguably more than Donald Trump does, despite the fact Trump ran on the AF platform and Ted Cruz ran against it back in 2016. But the bottom line is we need Trump's agenda, whether it's now or down the road after Trump, to be passed in Congress. And it's a lot harder when they can't get Trump's endorsement. Now, do I blame Trump for everything? Not necessarily. He's just endorsing the people that he knows. He's just endorsing the people, whoever he's told to, by his core key circle, and they endorse relatively who they know too. And there's very, very few America First politicians that are in office if you look at this, and the bottom line is America First people need to get involved bottom up. When I say there's not a whole lot in office, I'm talking about people that usually would run for Congress. Yes, we have businessmen, but we also have state legislatures, people like state representatives, people like state senators, and people like mayors that could espouse America First platforms at the local level. For example, if you're talking about a state like Michigan, you could have a Michigan First platform. You could try to push for things like railing against sanctuary cities, pushing things like you want to create more jobs, you want better, healthcare, wages, things like that. You got to connect with the people on the issues, and you got to, people need to get elected. So if we can have this network where we're able to get people elected to local offices or state offices, then they're a lot more prevalent, they'll have a lot more party backing, and they can change the party fundamentally at their local and state levels, as it's easier to change the poll of, say, your local or county Republican Party's platform than it is at the so-called state level platform or the national platform, which is the ultimate goal. So the bottom line is we need to get more people, and I'm encouraging other people that actually think they're serious about running for office, whether it be local or state office, shoot me a DM on Instagram or whatever. We could definitely talk about it. But it's definitely something that has to be talked about, because incumbent office holders are better fundraisers. They know how to play the game. Even in a place like Missouri, who knocked off the incumbent, it was the Attorney General who knocked off the incumbent in North Dakota in the Senate election in 2018, going against the grain, against the wave of the national current. Oh, wait, it was the state representative. The state auditor came close in Montana. You look at this throughout. Occasionally, you'll have a very strong, good candidate. Say John James, for example, in Michigan. John James was a businessman, but he gained national profile. He made the race a lot closer than what it was originally to be expected. He was down by 25 points in the polls. He ended up losing by just 6. In a couple months later in time, that's when the difference was between the polls that were taken in the election. So if in terms of people, trying to gain more popularity, it's easier if you have office experience. Again, Rick Scott was the incumbent governor. He was arguably more known in Florida than the incumbent senator that he knocked off. So you're going to need local experience. We talk about outsiders. We love outsiders. If there's businessmen that want to run, they can. And Daniel McCarthy in Arizona was one of the businessmen. If you look at this in Arizona, he just didn't spend any of his money, and that was the problem. People that voted for him, not a whole lot of them voted for him specifically. A lot of them just voted against McSally. And if you look at this map, there wasn't really any county he really had a base, and I think he did a little bit better in the rural areas. Apparently, Pima County demanded Daniel at 32.2%. I think that was his record county. Maricopa County, where all the population is in the state, voted for McSally by a 77-23 margin. He couldn't even capitalize off of the ability of campaigning easier in terms of getting his name out in a more concentrated population center relative to the state. He couldn't do that. So again, we look at this and we look at Kansas. Obviously, I think Arizona's more important when it comes down to it, because McSally has been a disaster. McSally, we call her Martha McAmnesty. She supported amnesty. And then Trump comes in office and she's trying to be buddy-buddy with his agenda, and it's just faux support. It's all fake. We know it. If she gets in there, especially after Trump's gone, she could be voting for amnesty again. We know. She's a flip-flopper, a big flip-flopper. Nobody likes a flip-flopper. The Democrats don't like her for this reason. The Republicans don't like her specifically because she is a flip-flopper. So that's another reason. Again, we have to get people that are going to challenge people on their record, mainly. And that comes down to the next thing. Besides, we talk about money. We talk about the fact that, they don't get Trump's endorsement, the fact that they don't hold local office. Another reason is electability. They need to give people something to vote for. And some America First candidates did a great job of this. And the ones that lost, their national profile was the main reason why, in my opinion. So again, we have to, maintain good optics. There's always going to be these so-called watchdog organizations that are going to be at your throat if you support things like restricting immigration. They're going to try to make you out to be a bigot of all sorts of things. They're going to write hit pieces on you. The same thing what they did with Kobach, despite the fact that we know Kobach, we've looked at his record, very little evidence of bigotry, just strong on borders, even, mainly illegal immigration, not even restricting legal immigration, which is something that I want to do personally. So again, we talk about optics. Optics are big. We got to, find a way to just distance ourselves from as much controversy as possible, because at that rate, the watchdog organizations look like total nut jobs. And we know they're nut jobs, but they're going to look way more like nut jobs than they actually are now. We already know they're nut jobs. But the bottom line is people need to understand that there is also a misconception that America First candidates are simply unelectable, even if they do agree with their policy. Roy Moore and Kris Kobach back in 2017 and 2018 respectively, they're not exactly the best example. Roy Moore was literally an accused pedophile. I think he deserved to lose. Kobach was actually too far right economically in terms of defending the Brownback administration, things like that. And again, this brings us to another point: populists on the right, the America First conservatives, and a lot of them are waking up to this, which is a good thing, including myself. Need not to necessarily be shilling for the free market and lowering taxes for billionaires all the time, especially billionaires and corporations that are pushing for social Marxism 24/7 that support the BLM organization, giving them, millions of dollars, which supports things like breaking down the nuclear family, whose leaders have said that they are trained Marxists and things like that. And the America First movement needs to understand that not all forms of welfare are necessarily bad. Again, we need to have a healthcare plan. We need to expand our base. We can reach out to more forgotten Americans, especially in rural areas and stuff like that, by reforming welfare, running on reforming welfare, reforming healthcare, instead of trying to take them away. People like Kobach, you look at the tax cuts, you look what happened there in Kansas. Again, the Democrat media kind of blew that out of proportion in the Brownback administration, because you did see high amounts of growth, especially in the Kansas City metropolitan area in Kansas. But at the same time, they did cut spending. That was the reason why it was a very unpopular policy. And you look at Deep Red Oklahoma, Deep Red Missouri voting to expand Medicaid. And this is huge in Missouri, especially if you look at the Medicaid expansion amendment, which was, in my opinion, I don't know if I would have voted for this amendment, because a lot of what it did was cover things like abortions and stuff like that, from what I heard. And I would not be down with that, even though I do believe in expanding Medicaid to a certain extent, as long as it will be efficient. So the bottom line is we have to deliver some sort of policy when it comes to healthcare. And offering a healthcare plan alone will probably get us a big portion of the electorate. And if the America First movement takes it and runs with it, because that is why people don't like the Republican Party. In the real world, there are a lot of Democrats that are reasonable on some issues, but they want a good healthcare plan. Republicans can't give it to them. Trump didn't give it to them. That's why the midterms were such a big L for the Republicans, simply because they couldn't come up with a healthcare plan. And it's really sad to see, but it is just the way it is. So Republicans need to stick to the original Trumpian principle. We need to support America First candidates, and we need to support the right candidates, and we need to get more people in state and local offices that espouse these ideas, because it will help change our party forever for the better. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Please like this video down below, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media, join the Patreon, or subscribe, star links in description. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle, out.